just to be clear, I love ads. Show me ads
Absolutely.
all the time. Nothing but ads. I actually hate content, but love ads. I have an ad.
That's
adder.
a fun little inverse. Yeah,
I have an ad adder that just basically rips out any of the content and just puts in more ads. So
They might be self-aware.
Hunter, I'm
Yes,
sick
Daniel.
of using my computer.
well, that's better than a few weeks ago where you were just sick. Now it's just
Right.
of using your computer.
I'm feeling a lot better.
Progress,
and now
progress.
it's not that I don't want to interact with computers. It's that I don't want to use computers. These hands, these beautiful, gorgeous hands, were not made for typing on a keyboard. They were made for building monuments and some other very physical sort of activity. The point is, I don't think that I want to use a mouse and keyboard anymore.
That's why you got to get into vibe coding. That's like a whole new subgenre. Are you
Is
familiar
that
with
where
vibe
I just kind of
coding?
like dance at the computer and it'll just sort of like code stuff out?
Interpretive dance is definitely one of the input modes, but it's mainly about having a conversation with your computer while it writes code.
Well, sure. We all know about my best friend, Klein, who
Yes.
is using the brain of Claude from Anthropic to do coding. I was doing some of that last night.
Were you vibe coding?
I was asking it questions, and then it kept trying to not use poetry for my Python virtual environment management. And I kept having to be like, no, please do it this way.
That's because you should have moved on to UV by now, but that's a whole subtopic.
We'll talk about that maybe offline. But anyway, despite that sort of back and forth, no, I've not been doing vibe coding. I've definitely... I like the idea of having a conversation with a computer to get something meaningful out. We've talked about a couple of the different, like, there's websites now where you can just type in a prompt and it will make a functioning website, which is really, really cool. I want more of that for more use cases. What if I just talked to Microsoft Word, and I don't mean just transcribe what I'm saying, because their transcription software has been out for forever. I more mean like for an email or for putting together a meeting and inviting the right people, or helping write out a spec document for a thing, or a variety of just different tasks of what if I didn't bother having to touch the thing in the first place. I'm just presumably talking to the computer. I just talk to it and it does everything else, instead of I'm talking to one extension in one program that can then write in that place. That's what I want.
Give me an example of like something you'd like. Well, I guess you sort of did. You like schedule an appointment.
Schedule an appointment, or I think a really great use case for this, and it would have to be very carefully done, because when it comes to any sort of larger purchase, I think I'd get a little nervous unless I'm shown intermediate results and here's 5 options, which these do, like travel planner. Hey, I want to go to Zimbabwe. I don't know, maybe not Zimbabwe. Sure, Zimbabwe. I want to go to Zimbabwe. I want to travel into Harare sometime.
Is that a real place?
It is a real place. It's the capital of Zimbabwe. I think I'm going to look it up. I'm like 90% sure. Zimbabwe. And look at this. I'm having to type on my computer. Harare. Great. I got it. Nailed it. Harare. I want to go to Harare. Fly into Harare in Zimbabwe in, I don't know, April. And spend like a week there. And then come back. And then the computer would say, I'll start looking for you. And if I go to like Google Flights right now, it'll show me, hey, for this set of like 5 days. And there's like a little calendar of, oh, you could save $200 if you go like back 2 days, forward this. Like those kinds of calendars and stuff, those are useful. But then I still have to, well, okay, if I leave on this Thursday and then I go on that, well, I'd have to reschedule these meetings or have to request 2 extra days off. Like, I want something that kind of synthesizes not just, I'll find you a bunch of different flights.
You want an assistant, but a real AI assistant.
Well, I guess in this case, like I want to put travel planners out of a job.
But if you had an assistant, like that's the kind of task you would give to your assistant. You'd say, hey,
right.
Check my calendars. If you need to coordinate something, coordinate it, but just you get this booked sometime in next month.
And the point is that even though I want to be involved in the process and be told, here's 3 itineraries to any of these work. Oh, okay, you don't like any of them for these reasons. I'll take that in mind and then give you a new sort of iteration on the concept. Like, I want that without having to literally or figuratively lift a finger.
I mean, don't we all?
But this seems like the promise of AI made manifest, right? We've talked about how certain things that were basically undoable previously are becoming way more doable. I'm not a front-end engineer. I have a website of a thing that like actually works. I want more of that. And we've talked about this for like, what's 2025 going to bring? It's agents. It's the ability to go out and interact with the rest of the internet or with other programs. And like, Klein in VS Code has a browser use sort of thing that it can kind of do now.
Model context protocol, man. Yeah, it's all the rage.
There's these janky, you're going to have to explain what that means to everyone in a sec, but like there's these janky little agents that can go out and do things sometimes under certain circumstances. And I'm excited to see where that is, both like now, because I haven't looked at it in a little bit, and then also 6 months or a year from now, because I do think by the end of this year, we are going to see like really broad capabilities of ask your computer do thing, it do thing.
Right. We have that, what we've demoed on the show in the past, OpenAI's Operator, and other people are coming out with similar solutions. And OpenAI also has a concept of tasks where you can say, hey, every day, please go in and do these things. And it opens up a web browser and attempts to do the work that you've assigned it. Right. It's just not very good. It's not there yet.
Right. So exactly. When I was leading with this question, like there are tools that are supposed to kind of do this already, but they're not there. And we've seen a couple of like open source implementations. The Anthropic folks have a version. I don't know. We're not quite there yet. Do we need one of the big players to come out with something and then everyone else to say, oh, that worked and now we understand why it works and we'll reverse engineer it, because everything stays, select for one company for about 6 weeks at this point?
Yes. And I think another, underlying issue is most large websites have a security layer that's meant to stop automated programs from accessing them. And they've spent a lot of time and a lot of money. And in larger companies, they literally have teams of people. Amazon has a team of people that does nothing but stopping your program from accessing Amazon. Why? Because they want to control that experience. They want you to go to Amazon.com, you a real human, and to navigate around, and they want to control it all. And they don't want their data to get out. They don't want everyone to know the price of every product that they have when something goes on sale. They want to own that.
LinkedIn, same sort of thing. They semi-famously don't have they do have an API. We're just not allowed to use it. And if you try to scrape their website, they'll absolutely hit you with the ban hammer. Yeah.
So that's a big challenge that these providers have to get past. Additionally, a lot of these services, so let's take booking a flight. You usually have to log in to book a flight
to United or Delta or whoever.
I'm going to go on LinkedIn and can you please? Here's a task I would love, because I don't like going on LinkedIn. Go on LinkedIn, review all the messages that came in, and anything that's not just like clearly an ad, summarize it for me in like a nice little email. The problem there is that once you log in, you agree to a terms of service. And at that point, LinkedIn has the ability to say, no, what you're doing is illegal. And they can come after you, or they can come after the person that's, automating and scripting all of this for you.
Most likely they'll just ban you, but they could.
But the legal frameworks take place to you. In general, you're not allowed to just automate all of your interactions away because you agree to these terms of services. So that's a thing. Then you have the actual technical solutions that are really actively fighting back. For those of you who don't know, I actually wrote a book on this a very long time ago called Instant Nokogiri. Nokogiri being so it's in the Ruby programming language. In Ruby, they have something called gems, which are these little libraries or add-ons. Probably the most famous one is Rails, Ruby on Rails. You may have heard of that. You probably haven't. Yeah. And so actually, there's a gem called Nokogiri. Compare this to like a Python module. It's actually more popular than Rails, although most people haven't heard of it. But if you look at the download numbers, more popular. So I wrote the book on how to use Nokogiri many years ago.
Okay.
But I enjoy scraping. I have a lot of scraping experience. And scraping,
so that's what you're going to use it for, is scraping websites, meaning like taking the data off of them. The kind of things that your OpenAIs and such of the world are definitely legally doing, of taking everything from every website.
I have definitely done a lot of that. But my point is just that that is another technical hurdle that's still, you have to get over in order to make these AI assistants truly the versatile, reliable creatures that we want them to be.
Unless it's using a real browser, I guess, and act it like on your computer and acting like a real person and like literally moving the mouse around. Is at that point, like, how would you? I mean, we're getting into a whole side discussion of like how there's this arms race between both sides of, we don't want people to automated, access these things, and people want to have stuff just downloaded from the darn website.
So there are many, many, many ways that they detect it. So first, if let's say you're running this in the cloud, right? You're running it on an Amazon server or a Microsoft server. Well, they know the addresses that all of those companies own, and they just flat out block them. So you don't get access because...
Right. But I'm saying this is something, I install some on my computer, and it opens up a real web browser, and it jiggles the mouse just like a real person would, and so on. And it even can, surely all those CAPTCHAs that we've been solving for years and years, that is not a blocker for like a modern AI, right?
Well, there are...
it can't be. If so like all the things that have a bus in them or whatever, or like...
No, it still is a blocker for a lot of things. However, there are many human-in-the-loop services so that you can try to solve it yourself. To when you detect it, there are teams of humans standing by to solve these for you. So you submit a request and it comes back within usually under 30 seconds. But to finish answering your question about how they detect it, so a lot of these solutions it is a browser, but it's a browser for the specific purpose of doing it. In other words, it's not like it's just taking over your existing browsing session and opening up a new tab to do these things. Right. And that new browser doesn't have a history. And they don't have a history where they can see that,
there's no
visited.
Cookies that it can say, this is obviously done real web surfing.
Yes, that gets flagged instantly.
So have it use your real browser.
Okay. Then the next thing that they detect is the movement of your mouse and the clicking frequency, and they analyze. And there's these large providers that anyone can basically drop in. Akamai Networks is one of the most popular ones.
All right.
So they detect whether your movements and your clicks on your mouse seem human or not human. Now, arguably, again, eventually you get good enough to replicate the human doing it.
That can't be very long before that's basically a problem for Akamai as opposed to us.
Sure. But they're constantly looking for what are the patterns.
Probably like, it was on this page for too short of a time to actually get the information, and then it went to 10 more pages very quickly.
Yes,
like that kind of information.
And depending on how they're doing it, I'm sure, I don't know if you've run an ad blocker, but if you do run an ad blocker, you get to websites where they're like, please disable your ad blocker. We're not going to let you have access. Not that I would know. That, just to be clear, I love ads. Show me ads all the time. Nothing but ads. I actually hate content, but love ads. I have an ad.
That's
adder.
A fun little inverse. Yeah,
I have an ad adder that just basically rips out any of the content and just puts in more ads.
Just more ads, and like while you're at it, it'll automatically respond to any Nigerian prince scams. And, yeah. Oh, hey, someone sent me an exe file over email. I should probably open that.
So yeah, well, there's still a ways to go.
The point of all of this is we're not quite there yet, but there are releases, open source and otherwise, like Microsoft just dropped what they're calling Omni Parser V2. It's an agent to control not just a browser for these kinds of use cases that we're talking about of like, go on this website and do some research for me. It can control Windows, which I think is very interesting, which presumably just means like it's aware of your screen on your desktop and can navigate around on that. Is solving, opening and playing Solitaire perhaps the ideal solution here? I don't know. Well, but being able to like navigate around Windows could be pretty interesting.
Yes, and why the Microsoft solution could be particularly interesting. So, OpenAI operator uses a Windows computer, and you can watch it navigate around the Windows computer. It's like, but what it's doing is essentially taking a picture of what it's seeing, and then it's parsing it to figure out what's going on there, and then thinking, okay, what's the action that I should take? What are the coordinates? Move the mouse to this coordinates, click on those things, and go. Microsoft potentially has the ability to do this at a much deeper level.
Right.
They can integrate with all the dynamic linking libraries and basically the API that's running underneath everything to make much more direct requests and things that computers
and
are
knowledge
much better
of what the things that it could click on.
Yeah,
next
to understand
so on.
the state and to make the interaction without having to simulate a human. So if they could wire up their operating system with something akin to the model context protocol, then the ability to integrate it with these AI assistants or any AI agent for that matter could be great. Like we don't have that operating system yet. What is the operating system of the AI agent? And Microsoft could potentially do it. I don't think Apple's going to do it. The obvious answer is some sort of like random Linux distro will do it, but for the masses, Windows seems like an obvious choice to have that feature, make it be a flagship feature that you can do the work or you can let the agent do your work, and it's you don't know the difference, right?
And I do think so, like for the, let's call it average person, I don't actually think that this is a killer feature. I think this is a neat thing of like, just tell your computer, hey, open up Windows or open up Microsoft Word and make me a new document and template it out for this thing based on this other document. That's cool. That's useful. The bigger use, I think, is for people with disabilities that have limited mobility, or for like the elderly or otherwise technologically challenged. My father or my grandfather on my mother's side, rest his soul, was very interested in continuing to be able to use technology for as long as possible. And in the last few years of his life, there was a lot of like him literally writing down, do this step, then this step, then this step. That like, I want to use the computer. I want to be able to, but needed to literally have it written down every single step. Which good for him for like pushing back against that and continuing to be involved. But I think to help people, more people that aren't necessarily going to remember, and especially for those who are going to be less receptive to like a new version of Microsoft Word where they changed where a bunch of the icons are or something like that. To make that easier for people to use, an AI agent that is aware of like, oh, you're looking for this button. It used to be here. Now it's located over here. I got you. Click, click. You know, show it to you so that you could actually click it, or it'll do it itself, kind of whichever. You know, like a varying level of helpfulness as opposed to, do you want a guide or do you want something that will do it for you? And I think that amount of assistance is going to be what really propels forward that kind of solution as like the real life changer. And that's for the elderly or disabled. There's variations of that same theme that I think would still be very useful to those who are more tech savvy, and like it's all on a spectrum. So someone who's kind of okay with computers, but is, I'll give you an example. I like to think I'm pretty good with computers. I've also looked at Adobe Photoshop a few times, and oh my God, there's a lot going on there. And if I'm not really familiar already with Photoshop, I don't know what the heck I'd be doing. Having an AI agent that says, okay, you want to do this in Photoshop, I will help you. This is where you do this. This is how you add a new layer. And it would like highlight, this is the button you'd click. This is why it's over here. Like giving me almost like having someone who knows the program sitting next to me explaining the stuff as I go. That would be so useful. Instead of me having to go and watch a bunch of YouTube tutorials and then kind of fudge my way through it step by step. Having something right next to me saying, this is how you do it. Like that would be very, very useful, even for a tech savvy person. So I think that this kind of, I guess it's an agent, whatever you want to call it, built into like at the operating system level, I could see that being enormous.
Yeah. That experience exists to some degree today with the OpenAI desktop app, where you can share an application window with it. And so it can watch what you're doing, and you can ask it questions, including in Photoshop. You know, how do I make this text extra bold, or add a drop shadow, whatever.
Is this all in the $200 a month
No, you
okay,
need,
this
you need
isn't
to have
anyone could use it.
No, I think I'm not sure anyone, but definitely in the $20 a month club.
All right,
You
but
can.
imagine once Microsoft, like right now we have Omni Parser V2, the agent for controlling Windows in the browser. What about V5, V10, where it's just part of Windows and it says no matter what program you open, I can help you use it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Apple has suggested, maybe more than suggested, they've said they're bringing this to the iPhone, where you'll just be able to say, complete this action in this app that wasn't something that Apple made, just this other app, that they're adding this layer on top of everything, an agent that can control your phone for you. Similar-ish types of things. I know I previously said I don't think Apple would do that with Mac OS, but maybe they would, because they are doing it with iOS.
I really want Gemini, I guess, or Google Assistant to be better on Android as well. Because now that we're talking about this, I think when I'm driving, I'm not supposed to be looking at my phone, so I don't. But boy, I sure would like to not have to wait to go to a red light to I want to open up this new playlist on Spotify. Granted, some of this is already doable, like play this on Spotify. Okay, it can usually do what it is that I'm asking. But certain things that seem like they should be really easy aren't yet. For example, hey, resume playback of that YouTube video that I was last watching. I can't do that, but that should be doable, right? And if these systems with agent access or this or that, however you want to describe it, if my phone has the ability to interact with itself in general and understand what I'm asking and okay, having been given that, I can do these 3 actions that will then do thing is being asked of me, instead of here are just the pre-programmed 10 assistant things it can do. I do want that kind of capability added. This is going to be a really meta one. So, hey audience, Hunter and I have a set of articles that we have for each of these episodes that we look at and kind of pick and choose from. And there's usually way more articles than we're going to actually kind of go over. But some of them are the seed for a conversation. Some of them were we're just telling you some cool news that we saw. Oftentimes, the day of recording, I haven't necessarily gone through all of the articles yet. I always do before we start recording. But if I'm driving my kids to school, for example, it would be kind of nice to say, hey, phone, read this set of articles that was given and don't do much other than just give me the highlights of each of them. And that would kind of prime the pump for me to then say, oh, I need to follow up on these 5 articles because those are the ones that I want to dig deeper into. And that's kind of like the Google Notebook LM feature.
I've done this, not that exact use case, but I've done this where I've had one of the deep research models go off and write a research paper for me about a topic I was interested. I then fed it into Notebook LM to create a podcast because it was 20 pages. I'm not going to read that. I then they created a 20-minute podcast, which I'd listened to in the car, and I was entertained. By the way, the topic was make the argument that Home Alone is just a modern interpretation of Dante's Inferno. That was the deep research task I gave, and then created a podcast and then listened to for 20 minutes during a car ride.
We've absolutely got to pull on that thread. No, hold on. Where do I start? What was the seed of that idea? Did you watch Home Alone right after reading Dante's Inferno? And you're like, you know what? These are basically the same thing. Well, where did that come from?
So it was Groundhog Day. And if you're familiar with the very famous Bill Murray film Groundhog Day, that film is often very directly connected with Dante's Inferno. And there's lots of writing about how it is just an interpretation of Dante's Inferno. And I believe even the writer has said, yeah.
Okay.
So I started wondering, well, what other films could you make the argument that they are just an interpretation of Dante's Inferno? And I think I recently saw something with Macaulay Culkin, and I'd watched Uncle Buck, which is one of his first films, and another great, John Hughes, is that the director? I think so. John Hughes film that came out before Home Alone, who was also directed by John Hughes. Anyways, that just, Brain, I was probably supposed to be doing something else entirely. Right. And Brain said, hey, Hunter, what if Home Alone was also an interpretation of what would that look like? And so, all right, do the deep research, whip out my credit card, $200, bling bling, get my 20-page paper, go over to Notebook LM, pay that upgrade fee so you get like the newest version, because you got to be the Plus member now to get the full version Notebook LM.
Oh, yeah, Diamond Medallion.
Put that in there. Sit back. It took a few minutes to generate the podcast, and then my phone Bluetooth to the car and away it went, and it was I was entertained.
Was it ultimately like, what did Notebook LM come to the conclusion of? Are they basically the same, or was it ultimately like you see some overlaps in themes, but it's not really the same?
Well, I didn't ask the question, is it? I said,
you
make
asserted
the argument.
It is,
yes.
Now, okay, I see.
Defend it. So it was a defense of. It wasn't the strongest, but it was interesting. I was entertained. It was 20 minutes of entertainment. That's what it was. It wasn't, some great paper that should be published worldwide, but as a podcast episode and something that I was uniquely interested in, I was compelled.
All right. Fair enough. Well, nope. I was going to try and make a really good segue between that and like the concept of self-awareness to sort of wrap it all up, but I don't. I think we're going to have to spend that $200 to send things off to Notebook LM to figure out what was the correct segue to do there. If you can think of a really good segue toward this all having been about us being self-aware, perhaps or perhaps not, you should hit us up in the comments.
We did build an AI agent at one point to figure out how to segue between these stories. I actually just I just commented out that code for the segue. It's still, even though we don't show it anymore in our like show notes that we work from, it still exists and is running. And I actually just last night I went ahead and commented it out because in the early episodes,
were kind of a hoot.
Well, some of the early episodes, I was challenging to figure out how do we have these conversations and move between these things, and there were lots of long, awkward pauses trying to figure, well, how do we go from here into AI generated worlds? What's the connection? And so the AI agent would be like, okay, here's how you bridge the two. It's all happening.
Where's it happening?
It's happening right here on They Might Be Self-Aware.
There's that segue.
Whether you're watching us on the YouTubes or the Spotifys or listening on the Apple Podcasts, actually, you can't watch us yet on Spotify. We could upload our videos there. I don't know how popular.
Spotify does video podcasts.
They do. Huh. I think it started with Joe Rogan when they spent the $500 billion to get the Joe Rogan show.
We're basically as popular as him.
We're close.
We're getting there.
I don't know the exact rankings, but it's
getting closer.
It's definitely.
We're closing the gap. Yeah.
Yes. If you happen to be an individual who likes watching video podcasts on Spotify, please let us know, because we could add them there as well. We do, of course, have the audio versions on Spotify and really every podcasting platform where you listen to podcasts. You can search for us and find us. And give us a like, give us a subscribe.
Thumbs up, some stars.
Yeah. And if you leave a comment, we will respond. And if it's interesting enough, we'll actually address it right here, live on
They Might Be Self-Aware.